want. It's great to be back in the centre of the known universe, Merthyr Tydfil, sometimes referred to as Mirth Vegas, due to the number of fruit machines in the local Witherspoons. Now I'm going to start with an apology. I'm not going to be talking about UFOs this evening. I know a lot of people come to see me talk about that subject. That's because I did cover that subject quite a lot in my recent TV series, and what I'm going to talk about today is everything that I haven't been allowed to put on television. I'm also... Let me just say though, if you're familiar with this film that I produced a little while ago called UFOs and NATO, the Human Mutilation Cover-Up, a very dark film about alleged cases of human mutilations on Brecon Beacons, someone who's featured in this film, Derek Goff, is actually in the audience if anyone wants to go and speak to him. That's Derek Goff, who was the person who was originally approached by the military source. He sat at the back if you want to go and converse with him this evening. Another subject I will not be covering this evening is much of what I would describe as fabricated terror, such as Jihadi Johnny or the creation of ISIS and that kind of thing. And that's because I've spent probably the last 3 months working very hard on 2 new documentaries, which I'm going to be releasing on this tour, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about this evening. Okay, here's this year's embarrassing photograph. I was taken back in the days when I used to wear a tie. Clearly as cynical then as I am now. This is an official school photograph. Here are my siblings. My brother, older brother, clearly undermined control even then. All right. Now I've split today's talk up into 2 sections. I'm going to speak for about 90 minutes. So if you want to get a drink while I'm speaking, that's not a problem. And I've entitled it Subversion in the UK. We'll have about a 15-minute break, and then I'll speak in part 2 for about 45 minutes, where I'm going to look at international subversion and interplanetary subversion. Okay, so I mentioned that I've produced 2 new films. The first one is called Patsy Driver, and is an independent investigation into the Cumbria shootings. Now these occurred in June 2010, just under 5 years ago. Glorious summer's day. A taxi driver got up, got in his taxi, went round the local countryside, murdered 12 people with a shotgun and a rifle, injured 11 others for no apparent reason. And I was suspicious of this event right from word go, and in December 2013 I've started my own detailed investigation, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this film in today's talk. The second film that I'm launching on this tour is another Madeleine McCann expose entitled The Phantoms. Now this is a 3-hour film. The first one is a 2-hour film, so I don't have time to go through all of the evidence in both these films in today's talk. But briefly, the new Madeleine film is all about people who claim to have seen an abductor with a child in their arms on the night Madeleine was reported missing. And it examines with a fine-tooth comb their statements and asks or looks at the credibility of those statements. Okay, so the first film, Patsy Driver, as I said, Derek Bird, 2nd of June 2010, just gets up one morning, no apparent reason, goes and kills 12 people. Now I've been back to the area, or I've been to the area 4 times now, and each time I've spent 3 or 4 days there, and I've tracked down quite a lot of first-hand witnesses. There were 24 shooting locations, and at those locations there were 90 witnesses. Of those 90 witnesses, I've managed to speak to 36. Of those, 26 have given me testimony about what they saw. So I've got quite a good picture of what happened in these events, and I would even go as far as to say that I now know more about this case than anyone other than those who have seen the official police files. And I do not agree with the verdict of the inquest. I'm going to show you a quick clip from the film. And 2 of these locations were captured on CCTV. But why have I not been able to find any images which clearly show Derek Bird with a gun in his hand in Whitehaven, or anywhere else that day? I repeat, I cannot find a single clear image in the public domain showing Derek Bird with a gun in his hand.
He was a quiet person, but a nice guy. He's a nice guy, he's a pleasant guy.
He had a very, very nice temperament, and he was always very, very charming.
From a decent family, and in a decent and very beautiful neighbourhood.
A family man.
You know, if you had a child, Derek, can you just look after this? We will last for an hour because I've got a crisis, yeah?
Yeah.
He wouldn't have even thought twice about it.
He's not violent, he's not overly aggressive.
He was a reasonable lad who went about his business, apparently, in the right way.
And, you know, once you got to know him, you could have a laugh and a joke. I've spent many a time at motocross meetings with him, you know, like socialising as you do, you know, having a drink after the race meetings and having a laugh and a joke about what's happened.
There wasn't any underlying reason.
Somebody said, oh, it's Derek Bird, it's a taxi driver, and I said, oh, no, we know the lad, surely he hasn't been shot. And then they said, no, I think it's him that's done the shootings, and I said, oh, never.
So were you surprised when you found out it was him that had supposedly done these shootings then?
Absolutely gobsmacked, out of character.
You can't believe what's happened.
And then I heard two noises. I didn't even know there was shotgun at the time. It was just two really loud bangs. Then it seemed like 30 seconds a minute, stirring at us, and then phew, off he went.
So he stared at you for 30 seconds at least?
At least, yeah.
Right. So you got a good look at him?
Yeah.
I've got two pictures of Derek Bird here.
Yeah.
Because obviously what you've said contradicts the picture.
It does, yeah.
Right.
The person that I thought that I'd saw was probably late 20s and black spiky hair.
What was the length of the hair?
Probably inch and a half, spiked up.
Okay. Now there's a description of a younger man on the police website as well, which was released about 11 AM that morning. Now the two conclusions I come to, or two beliefs I now hold, having examined this case. The first, I do believe that Derek Bird was under mind control, and second, I believe there was at least one other gunman. Now I've looked at all of the 24 shooting locations and tried to get all of the media statements and as many witness statements as I can. And if you look through them, you find lots and lots of witnesses from the second murder, because there's no hard evidence that Bird was involved in the first two murders, but from the second murder onwards, he's described as his eyes wide and staring, blank look on his face, expressionless, again and again and again. This is what witnesses describe him as. In my opinion, that's describing someone under mind control. And we've seen there the witness saying that the gunman was in his 20s with short dark hair. That cannot be a description of Derek Bird. But there's 2 hours of evidence in these programs. Now, I also look at potential motives as to why this operation may have been carried out. And I do provide quite a compelling one for the murder of the second person, that's Kevin Commons, a solicitor who was taking legal action against United Utilities. I suspect he was the real target of these incidents. Which means that, if I am correct, that the verdict of the official inquest is also incorrect. Now, about halfway through the shootings, there's a place called Thornhill. Now, one of our witnesses seen there in my film, he describes being overtaken by the gunman. And he knows it was the gunman because the quarter panel glass was out. He gave a statement to the police, and he said the gunman did not turn into the Thornhill estate. He continued on and turned on the dual carriageway and turned left, where other shootings took place. And I've also got two witnesses at Thornhill estate saying that the gunman was in a maroon vehicle, right? When the gunman's vehicle, or Bird's vehicle, well, it's similar to that you can see on the screen. It was a silver colour. Now, these witnesses' testimonies suggest to me there was a second gunman. Now, because those witnesses' testimonies don't corroborate, they don't match, what you would expect is the coroner to get all of those witnesses at the inquest and cross-examine them in front of the jury to try and find out what really happened. None of those witnesses were asked to give evidence at the inquest. So I suspect that Coroner Roberts and Chief Superintendent Slattery, or I hypothesise in the documentary, that they were running that inquest to ensure that the verdict was that of what had already been put out by the mainstream media. And just to touch on mainstream media, the BBC were in Whitehaven before 12 o'clock. Now, the police didn't release that there'd been any shootings until around about 11 o'clock. It's 2.25 hour drive from the headquarters, Look North, BBC, to Whitehaven. So how did they get there so quick? That's another area which suggests that there was foreknowledge. Okay. Now, many of you will have seen my films about Madeleine McCann, buried by mainstream media, the true story of Madeleine McCann. If you haven't seen them, please go and watch them online. They're free of charge to watch. And just to reiterate the reason why I made these films, I've been campaigning now for quite a lot of years to try and get our media to tell the truth and stop lying about 9/11, the London bombings and many, many other issues. And I wanted to expose mainstream media for the tricks that they get up to. And I saw this case as probably the best case to do that with. And that's why I chose to make this 4-hour-long documentary. In order to expose what mainstream media truly are, which I would describe as perception management propagandists. They're not about telling you the truth. But it seems that they're not only using news media in order to cover up the real facts about Madeleine McCann, they're also using TV dramas to manipulate people's perception of reality. Anyone see this? The missing 8 hours of it. 8 hours of it. In order to manipulate the public's perception as to the risks pertaining to having your child abducted if you go on a foreign holiday. That's all this is, in my opinion. This would have cost millions and millions of pounds to make. And if you don't think this is connected to the Madeleine McCann case, I suggest you do some thinking. Okay, now in December last year, after my documentaries got quite a lot of views online, over 250,000 views, I decided it was time to tell the mainstream media about these documentaries. So I emailed all of these mainstream publications, the whole of mainstream print media, including the BBC and Newsnight. And this is what I said to them in my email. I am the producer of a new film about the Madeleine McCann case. The film is the most comprehensive investigative documentary ever produced on the case and is over 4 hours long. The film has now been watched by over 250,000. It's approaching 500,000 now. Slowly, the British public are learning the truth about the Madeleine McCann case. The facts of the case are quite straightforward and are covered in detail, but these facts seem to have been obscured by the many baseless stories that have been put out over the last 7 years in the media. I would be happy to be interviewed by your newspaper about this new documentary. The film is fully independent and has not been subject to interference by certain government agencies. Hence, it is closer to the truth than anything produced before now. If you go online and read the thousands of viewers' comments about the film, you will see that it has been very well received. I am currently working on another film about the McCanns, which will uncover more information which has not been featured in the media. I can give you information about that should you be interested. I am willing to meet with your newspaper to be interviewed about why I made these films and tell you more about them. Okay, so I never received a single reply from any of these newspapers when I sent that email. Now, I did receive an email from someone claiming to be a freelance journalist a few weeks ago. This is somebody called Jenny Kleeman, who has been featured on Sky News a lot, discussing the newspapers. She's done reports on The One show, Channel 4, so she's all over mainstream media. And she said in her email, "Dear Richard D. Hall, I am a freelance journalist. I'm making a film for The Guardian's website about the growing number of people who believe the mainstream media isn't asking the right questions about the disappearance of Madeleine McCann." So right there, she's making a documentary about what people believe. Not the facts of the case, what people believe. Time and again I've been referred to your documentaries on the subject, which I've found intriguing. Now, I've had hundreds of emails from people who've watched my documentaries. Nobody has described them as intriguing. People describe them as compelling. I read with interest that you have a new documentary coming out, as well as a forthcoming speaking tour. I'd value the opportunity to interview you and see you in action at one of your talks in late March or early April. Is there a telephone number I could reach you on to discuss this? So I replied to Jenny Kleeman and I said, yeah, I'd love to be involved or be featured in a film for The Guardian's website, but I've got 3 conditions. The first is that you focus on the facts of the case, not on what people believe. The second is that you allow me to see what you produce so that I can have final approval. So if I'm not happy with anything within it, you can then change it. And third, you place links to my documentaries wherever you feature your documentary. So several emails were exchanged, and in those emails I gathered that Kleeman is not really responsible for the edit. She's just collecting video testimonies for somebody else. So I got her to request these conditions of her string pullers. She came back. I've looked through your requests and spoken to my editors. We can't agree to your conditions. As a documentary maker yourself, I'm sure you can appreciate that ceding editorial control to one of your interviewees is simply not ethical or possible, and neither I nor The Guardian could agree to it. Well, I wasn't asking for editorial control, I was asking for final approval. And this is why we never get any truth in our mainstream media, because they never allow anyone to see anything that they produce when they include subjects in their documentaries. So, having given her my conditions to appear in this documentary, which, keep your eyes peeled for it because it'll be coming out soon, and I suspect it's going to be a hit piece, probably a hit piece in order to manage the growing number of people who are finding out the truth about Madeleine McCann. She turns up with a cameraman at my Nottingham venue, wanting to interview me, after not agreeing to my conditions. And then she starts interviewing people coming out from my talk, asking their opinions on Madeleine McCann. So there's something brewing in the mainstream with regards to Madeleine McCann. Keep your eyes peeled for it, because in my opinion it'll just be a load of disinformation. Alright, and staying on the subject of mainstream media, I've said it before, and I'll say it again, that I don't think newspaper stands or newspapers are there to make money, because you can buy a story without buying a newspaper. Many people are turning their TVs off now. I've thrown my TV set out the window a long time ago. I don't watch it. And you can opt to do that. You can opt not to watch television, but you cannot opt not to go and get your groceries. We're forced to see these newspaper stands, and they seem to be everywhere now. There was a time when you had to go into a newsagent's in order to see these disgusting mainstream headlines. I read somewhere that Lidl and Aldi, now more than 50% of the population do their shopping at Lidl and Aldi. And suddenly we see newspaper stands in Lidl and Aldi, which were never there before. They're on garage forecourts, they're everywhere, and they're not there to make money. They're there so that you buy that story on the headline, goes straight into your subconscious. Another Cyril Smith cover-up, or Clarkson bullshit. Straight into your subconscious. You cannot elect not to see this shit. Right? So I'm wanting to start a campaign against Lidl, Aldi's and other shops which do not need to stock this shit, and say to them, right, until you remove that from your shops, I will not be buying my groceries from there. We need to stand up to it, because as I said, you can turn your television off, but you cannot get rid of this propaganda. I mean, just the point about them not making money, just look at the Metro newspaper. It's free. They're giving you their propaganda away, because enough people aren't buying these. Alright, now, last year, I stood here and I gave my beliefs on the Madeleine McCann case. But these beliefs are based on evidence. And if you haven't seen the films, I suggest you watch them, because these beliefs might surprise you if you haven't seen the films. But just to point out one piece of evidence, the cadaver dog evidence. Eddie, the cadaver dog, alerted to the smell of the past presence of a human corpse in 11 locations associated with the McCanns. It was in the apartment, it was on Kate McCann's clothes, it was on Madeleine's toy, and it was on their car, and it was on the key. So that evidence is very, very compelling if you watch it, but it's not been put out vastly in the mainstream media. So my beliefs on the Madeleine McCann case are, and this is, you would need to see 4 hours of documentary in order to understand why I believe all of this. That Madeleine McCann died in April or May 2007. I believe Madeleine McCann's corpse was situated in the McCann's holiday apartment for a period of time. I believe Madeleine McCann's corpse was transported in the McCann's Renault Scenic hire car some weeks after she died. I believe there has been a high-level cover-up about what really happened. I believe there is a reason for the high-level cover-up which goes further than most people have contemplated. And I believe the story represents the best opportunity to expose mainstream media. Now, in the last talk, I said that I wasn't prepared to expand on this. The reason that I think there is a reason for the high-level cover-up which occurred. I'm going to try and shed some light on that today. Now, I made much use of this slide in my films, and this slide explains how the cover-up has operated over the last 8 years. The central person is a guy called Clarence Mitchell, the government's senior media spin doctor, who was effectively given to the McCanns in order to provide them protection from the media. A limited company was set up by the McCanns, which I've termed the McCann team, and that McCann team used at least 3 rogue private detective agencies. And I'm confident to stand here and say that they were all rogue in one way or another, because Numerous people have served prison sentences who were associated with those private investigation agencies. And their role, largely, it seems, was to produce bogus stories which were fed into our media. The stories that you've read on front page headlines for the last 8 years about Madeleine McCann, vast majority of them misled the public, predominantly to try and trick the public into thinking that there had been an abduction. We know that intelligence agencies have been involved in this case, from people such as Gonçalo Amaral. Gary Hagland has links to MI6, and others as well, such as we had Control Risks Group were involved. We know that Gordon Brown lent on the Portuguese investigation into Madeleine and trying to get them to change certain ways that they were running that investigation, so no one can really dispute this chart. But in order to shed light on that question, let's go back to a time before Madeleine was reported missing and redraw this chart, okay, before that holiday. Well, clearly Clarence Mitchell wasn't involved until 3 days after Madeleine's reported missing. We didn't have any private detective agencies, obviously. The media were not aware of Madeleine McCann before the holiday. And of course the Portuguese police were not investigating the case, so we can get rid of that. But can we go any further, right? So the question I'm asking in today's talk is, were the McCanns, or one of the McCanns, known to intelligence agencies before the 2007 holiday? Now, there's no hard evidence and there's no proof that they were, or one of them was, right? But I'm going to show you some circumstantial evidence at the end of this talk, which is very interesting, that I think you might want to see. So I'm going to park that question there. Were the McCanns known to intelligence agencies before their 2007 holiday? And I'm going to show you some, as I said, I'm going to show you some evidence later on in the talk. Because if they were, and I'm not saying they were, if they were, it would certainly explain this rapid cover-up. Now, this is my list of beliefs on the Madeleine McCann case. I'm going to add one to this. I believe the Detective Chief Inspector Andy Redwood, who led the Scotland Yard investigation to allegedly find Madeleine, should be arrested. I believe he should be arrested for attempting to pervert the course of justice, because I believe he has fabricated evidence. And this is the evidence that I believe he has fabricated. And he showed this evidence to over 7 million people in October 2013 on Crime Watch UK. Now, in order to understand why I believe this is a piece of fabricated evidence, you'd need to watch my new film on Madeleine McCann called The Phantoms, which, as I said, examines with a fine-tooth comb all of the statements people have come up with that somebody was seen walking away from the apartment with a child. 3 hours. 3-hour documentary, which I haven't got time to go into all of the evidence today.